Okay, what I'd like to do now is to introduce Emma King, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Victorian Council of Social Services. Emma joined the Victorian Council of Social Services, VCOSS, in 2013, providing a strong voice of leadership and advocacy on social justice issues for the community sector. Emma was previously Chief Executive Officer of the Early Learning Association Australia, formerly Kindergarten Parents Victoria, the peak organisation representing parents and providers of early learning services in Victoria. Emma also has an extensive background in the public sector and in workforce and education issues, having worked as a Victorian policy advisor, a teacher, and in a range of industrial and training roles at the Victorian Independent Education Union and the Finance Sector Union. Emma's qualifications include a Master's in Industrial and Employee Relations, a Graduate Diploma of Education, and a Bachelor of Arts. Emma is a regular commentator on social affairs and will guide us on how to advocate to your MPs or political candidates on issues of importance to you. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you for a very kind introduction indeed. If I can begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I am on today. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, so I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and to emerging leaders, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. If I can also acknowledge Gary and Chris in particular, the panellists. I just had the pleasure of hearing synergies, I think, that we're all, a number of things that we're collectively working on, and all of you who are here today. It's great to be with you. So I've been asked to speak about how do you advocate to MPs on issues that are important to you? And my understanding is that a number of people online are here as individuals, others are part of organisations. So I've tried to kind of tailor accordingly, but of course, you know, feel free to flag if there's something that I kind of haven't covered enough or anything along those lines as well. And there'll always be some things that you are more than across, particularly having heard the conversation that we've just had now, and other things that might be, you know, kind of something to think about a little bit as well. I think from an overarching point of view, I've just assumed that, you know, people kind of know who their MPs are and where they are and all those sorts of things as well. And I guess I wanted to flag as a first point, remembering as well that MPs are inundated. They've got people flooding their offices every single day, let alone if your MP is a minister as well. You know, they are incredibly busy. They and their staff are really, they're stretched, but they are generally very integrated into their local communities. And I think it's pretty rare to find an MP and their office who are not really in touch with their local communities as well. So in terms of, I guess my point around that was it's almost that the aspect around how to get cut through, because if you're, I reckon, a member of parliament or one of their staff, you've got people flooding through your door every day from everything like, I don't know how to sign on to the power saving bonus. How can you help me to, I don't have anywhere to sleep tonight, to, you know, I've got an issue with my NDIS issue. So they've kind of got a bit of everything coming their way. So in terms of how to get cut through and what's a very noisy space, some of the things that I started to think about, and I can see Karen Taranto, if I can just acknowledge Karen as well. Karen's one of our policy stars at VCOSS and has been part of the process of some of the things that we've worked through. And if you've got questions later, we might sort of share them and join in together. But I know some of this will sound really simple, but I reckon it's harder than what it is. And that is when you've got an issue, you know, if there's a key issue or your election platform or something that you're working to put forward, it's being really clear about what it is, why does it matter, for whom is it for? So in some cases, it will be a personal thing that you're trying to get cut through. It might be that you've got issues with your aged care package. You don't know who else to go to. You've gone to your local MP and you want them to help you. In other cases, it'll be because there's an election platform and you're looking at how can you kind of push it across and how can you get traction around the benefit. And I think one of the key, it's being very tangible, because otherwise you get an MP who says, well, you've come to me, you've got a complaint, but I don't actually know, I'm not really sure what it is, and I don't actually know what to do about it, because some of the issues we've got, they're really big, they're wicked problems, they've been around for a long while. So there's that part around saying, well, actually, this is what I want you to do about it. And I do think that piece about being succinct, it's really, really important. So having your elevator pitch and having your elevator pitch ready to go. And, you know, can you describe what your issue is in 100 words or 200 words? And I look at Karen on the screen as I say this, because when we did the VCOSS election platform, we had absolute rigor around every ask where they had a 200-word limit. And when we did our budget platform, 100-word limit for each ask that we had. So we know that we could write this kind of Bible that would have everything in it, but actually it's so big and it looks so complicated that people aren't going to read it. So it's been really succinct and sharp around ideas. Going to the point of some of what Chris mentioned before, that power of evidence, the data and evidence, and I think that combining it with personal stories as well is really powerful, because different things will have an impact on different people. So, but we're always told to look for an evidence base. For any of us from the community sector, we know one of our challenges is whenever we're funded for a program, etc., we're not funded to collect the evidence base. So it can be quite hard sometimes to show the evidence we want, or alternatively, it's evidence that's collected over time. And to draw on early childhood, for example, there's this no-brainer research by Nobel Prize winning economists that show every dollar that you put in, what it saves down the track and the long-term benefits. But that doesn't fall within one electoral cycle. But in saying that, we've seen some announcements more recently around the Family Violence Royal Commission and the Mental Health Royal Commission. And notwithstanding the fact that we have a significant need for housing, the big housing build, that actually go well beyond one term of government. So we are seeing a bit of a shift in that front. But I think no matter what, it's that piece about keeping an eye on the end game. And people have different views about this, whether it's sort of transactional or relational, if you like, in terms of how we engage with MPs. I personally think it's relational. I enjoy building relationships with people. I enjoy having, I want to be able to test ideas out, because often through being able to talk through things, you might be able to find a different solution or one that might work that perhaps you hadn't contemplated in the first place. Lots of other things in terms of, if you're going in around an election platform or something along those lines, you want to get a photo and you want to tweet it out and all those sorts of things as well. So thinking about how you use that. Going to a comment that was made earlier as well, and that is, do you have allies? So, and I say this in terms of whether it's organisational or individual, because is it an issue for yourself? And some issues they will be issues that are very personal around particular things that are happening to you or your family. But also, if that's the case, it often means similar things are happening for other people as well. Or is it an organisational issue? I think there's a piece here that's really strong about where we collectively, I say we, because we certainly do this at VCOSS, about where we join efforts and where we join together, and about the strength in numbers, and also not being divided and conquered along the way. So I'll come to that a little bit more. But in terms of thinking more broadly about what groups do you belong to, what other organisations might you be a member of, how you build those coalitions for change. And I'll give you a couple of very quick examples. One is in my previous role when I was a CEO of Early Learning Association, we wanted to make sure that we were talking to VCOSS as we were developing our budget asks and our election asks. And I really wanted to see them reflected in the VCOSS platform, because I thought, it shows that we're talking to one another. It shows that our links are the same. And it also might mean that it's going to get to people that I wouldn't, when my previous role, I wouldn't have had a direct line to in the way that I do in my current role. So, and that was well before this job was on the table. But it's looking to build, I think, sometimes unusual coalitions for change as well. So we're doing quite a lot of work at the moment with Chamber of Commerce and Industry, environment groups, others that are maybe outside of some of the groups that we would have traditionally worked with in the same way. And there is definite power in being able to do that. And it changes who you have discussions with. And it also changes, one of the things that I've learned is having some really great people from very different organisations, when we're listening to them, when we're understanding each other, they're sometimes some of our greatest allies when we're going into meetings, or they're talking to ministers and others themselves. And it's been really effective. So anyone who's seen Chamber of Commerce led a process. It was called the Victorian Summit, looking for a Victorian 2050, and brought together a group of unusual players to be in the same room and landed this long-term vision. And can I be upfront? It included Trades Hall, Chamber of Commerce and Industry, ourselves, others, and then there was a number of people who were on a steering group. I'm not pretending we all agreed on everything, because we didn't, but we were able to put forward a number of issues that people had identified and asterisks, the ones where people had different views. We had a document we could all be comfortable with at the end of the day. The other example I'd give, and one that Karen has a lot of connection with, is we've got a group called the Housing Peaks Alliance. So it's particularly for groups that are peaks. It's a limited membership. There's only sort of 6 members in there, but one of the things we are really mindful of is that it's very easy, going to points that Fiona's made around some of the issues for housing. When we look at groups such as the Public Tenants Association, the Community Housing Association, Council for Homeless Persons and others, it's very easy for us all to go in with a group of different asks and present them to a minister who looks at them and says, fundamentally, what am I meant to do with this? I've got 6 or 7 groups, they're all coming in with something different. Like, I don't know what I'm meant to do with that. We work very, very hard behind the scenes, and it is behind the scenes, to get on the same page, to look at where we can synchronise our asks, and also to have a degree of candour about where there is going to be difference because something is a deal breaker for an organisation, and we work to understand that. But we know that by going forward together, there's just greater strength in how that we can do that. And part of that is trust that's built up over time. And I can remember, anyway, I could talk about that one for a long while, but I do think it's a really powerful example of coming together and where and why you can do that, because it takes time and it takes effort and it takes trust. But for me, I want the discussions of, if you like, of if there's conflict, I want it to be behind closed doors. We can have a good contest of ideas, and I want us having a really great forward-facing document that actually articulates what do we collectively want. And it just brings so much more power with it. I think one of the other things that I'm mindful of, just building on some comments that maybe Chris made before, is that sometimes it's about what conversations do you have behind closed doors, that sometimes for us, some of the biggest wins, people won't know that we've been there, to be frank, but it doesn't matter, because it's actually about what is our principle and what are we here for and what are we here to achieve. And so for me, sometimes it's about what are the conversations you have behind closed doors, where someone's trusted you enough to bring you in and ask for your opinion, and they might have done something that actually might have involved them backing down on something or changing their mind, and they want to look at how they control a narrative around that. I'm fine with that as a general rule. I don't care. I just am interested in the outcome. There are other things that we are much more overt about. So I think it depends on, to me, on what the issue is and where you are. But again, I say this as someone who's running an organisation rather than as an individual. But I think, you know, there's that part around looking at how do you play along the way, keeping your eye on this is our end game, and this is where we want to get to. What's the best way of getting there? Because it's not about having a big win that I need to go and celebrate and take all the credit for. It's actually about how do we get to the place that we want to be in. And I've definitely learned lessons along the way on that front as well, where each time you do something like, yeah, I might do a little bit of that differently next time. And again, to me, that comes to part of the value of relationships, because you know where there's particular sensitivities for people as well, and you want to respect that and be mindful, because we all know how you make someone feel is really important, and it's going to make such a big impact on the next time that you're engaging with them again, and being a person that hopefully that they feel that they can trust and they can and that they want to work with as well. In terms of looking as well, some of the things that have really struck me, particularly in my 9 years at VCOSS, is sometimes we have like those short-term wins, and others are they're a long game, and it's sticking in it for the long run. So when I think back to, and apologies, given I'm a COTA event and looking at early childhood, but when I was at ALA, Early Learning Association Australia, we were advocating for 3-year-old kindergarten, and I was told multiple times that we were dreaming, we had to stop it, we needed to stop talking about it, it was really annoying. And now we've got free 3-year-old kindergarten, and we've seen a more recent announcement where we've got actually Victoria is now going to be running 50 childcare centres that are intentionally placed in childcare deserts. There's free 3-year-old kindergarten, and there's considerably expanded 4-year-old kindergarten. And again, we've been advocating for a lot of that behind the scenes, but it's, to me, the point of don't give up. Like, the evidence was in and we had to keep going. But in saying that, it was a really interesting example where we draw the parallel of saying, you know, we almost, at the end, what we asked for seemed really big, but it was like we asked for a scooter and they ended up with this really good bike at the end of the day. So it's just kind of sticking in for the long game. I thought I'd touch just very briefly on the VCOSS process for anyone who's interested, just as a high overview. And some of you will have been involved in this along the way as well. In terms of our election platform, we start really early. So we start a survey amongst our member organisations. Last year, I think we would have done the survey to ask people, look, what are your kind of top issues, etc. as well. We then had member consultations earlier this year, just to tease out issues more broadly, and then some one-on-one, consultations with people, again, to tease things out in a little bit more detail. Alongside that, as we were crafting our document, we met with a group of, we went through and teased out our kind of wish list of external organisations and people we'd like to talk to who aren't normally in our, you know, might not be in our kind of ordinary ecosystem, like a number of economists and health professionals and just a raft of other people who are interesting. They're experts at what they do, and they deal in their field in a different way to the way that we field in ours. So we wanted to stress test to say, well, this is what we're asking for. Do you reckon it's right? Or do you reckon that we've missed something? Or what do you think? And it's interesting to me about how many of them we've actually been able to continue. Firstly, everyone said yes. People were very generous with their time. It's built longer enduring relationships with a range of different people for whom, you know, we had some engagement with, but it's now, I would say, a deeper engagement. And it has definitely influenced our election platform, because we've got a sense about going, hey, do you know ex-ministers looking at this? We might be like, no, we didn't actually, but we do now. So we're going to you might just craft something or frame it in a slightly different way. And that was something that I think helped enormously. Karen was part of the team that, as I said, it was then about, it's really easy to write really long documents that have got tons of stuff in them about why something's important, because we know things are important. And when you work in the fields that we all do, it's hard to not feel emotional about that as well, because it is really emotional. When you've just spoken to someone who's deeply impacted on the ground in a frontline situation, then you've got to distill it back into like a quick ask in a document. I reckon there's a lot of rigor involved in that. So being able to distill that into a quick ask that someone can see, and keeping in mind, we cut across almost every minister. So we've got to be really mindful in how we do that in a way that's going to cut through and not be so big that someone puts it down and they just don't read it fundamentally as well. We then craft our document as well, and we build an engagement and an advocacy platform, and we intentionally curate that to different audiences. So we've got a list of people that we will write to and we will see, and we'll intentionally make meetings and etc. with. Many of them are obviously ministers, but some of them are a different audience as well, because we know that they have influence and impact on ministers and the Premier and others as well. And I should say, as we were developing our platform as well, we did feed ideas through to the Premier's office and to others, because we know their decision-making starts really early. It's not like it's really, I'm sure most of their election promises, they've already decided, and they decided them months ago, in the same way that for budget, we know they've made their decisions as a general rule by about Jan, if not earlier. And the notion that people are going in with their budget asks in April for a May budget, like, it's done and dusted. Unless something happens, it's actually kind of amazing that people go, actually, and things do happen at the last minute, because they definitely do. But as a general rule, it's already done. So we were very intentional about feeding things in as we went, and particularly as we were working through. And I should say as well, also working with a crossbench and also working with opposition on that front as well. It's not just ministers on that front as well. And then having a comms strategy, and that piece about how you get cut through. And I'll just use one example, because it was something that I loved, and I have to give credit to Ryan Shields, who is our communications director. But he had to convince me last time around doing an election advent calendar. And I was a bit worried, because I thought, I worry that our members will see this and they'll think that we're wasting their money because we've put out this, literally, you'd open one of the 25 doors, you'd open one for each day of the 25 days leading up to the election. And under each one was, you had chocolate and an ask. And it was hilarious in that it got this incredible cut through. We had people from Neil Mitchell and others filming them opening the ask, and I probably shouldn't describe it, actually. People who did it, and they sent it to us discreetly to say, and it meant that they looked at what our asks were in a way that I don't think it would have got cut through otherwise. So Ryan was pretty creative in thinking about how do we get people to look at it who they're really busy, they don't have time to look at this, they're not going to read through a written document, they're just not, as a general rule. How might we get people to have a look and go, you know what, that's funny and that's a bit clever, about different ways of getting messages across as well. So I flagged that alongside, obviously, the importance of social media as well as traditional media and other things. We just try and cut across the lot. And it was that when I say to the advent calendars, we ran out last time because we had so many people asking for more, including MPs. And we're doing another MP forum at our AGM later this month. And we had all of the MPs and their advisors saying, but can we have some more? And which made me laugh because we only ordered like 50, still really mindful around the cost and all those sorts of things. But we've just done our order for the next one and gone, we'll put in some more. But it kind of highlights, here's our top 25 and here's how we try and get cut through to different audiences, because it's not like we're only speaking to our members of parliament, we're actually speaking to other key influencers. So our journalists, the people who are on prime time on our radios, all those sorts of people as well, because they will also have a very big impact, obviously, on what we can progress with our members of parliament. And the other thing I'd also just say in kind of closing, that importance of always acknowledging, and I think everyone here knows that, but acknowledging and thanking our members of parliament when they're working with us. We know that a lot of them, the other thing I would say is we know that a lot of them will agree. When you're talking about things like elder abuse, etc., I think it'd be pretty hard to find any MP who didn't acknowledge that that was a significant issue. It's the what to kind of do about it, which is where we need to work together. But that piece around acknowledging where often people are working very hard to work with us. They're often going into the state process around budget priorities and election priorities, and sometimes they don't get up for things that they care about and we care about. And then if we go and kick them as well, I think it can feel pretty brutal. And sometimes we need to, because these issues matter and we've got to keep them on the agenda, but just being a bit mindful about how that all plays. And there's almost that time of when do you go public and when do you go hard and when do you pull back? And I think it's an imperfect science. I think we all do our best. But that's probably it in summary from me, Gary, I think for the moment, and happy to take any questions that you've got. And as I said, Karen's online as well. So Karen can jump in with any questions, particularly if anyone's got any particular interest around our election portfolio. Hearing the wise words of Elizabeth and Fiona and others earlier, I should just mention, forgive me here, we did a listening tour around the state and backed it in with phone polling. So we worked with Neighbourhood Houses Victoria and went to local communities. Digital divide came up everywhere we went, as did loneliness, and issues around the digital divide, in terms of people being connected and having devices and knowing how to use them and being upsold products because they didn't know. But the other thing that nearly everyone said to us is, I just want to talk to someone. It's like everything's being moved online, from government to my energy service, etc. Why can't I just talk to someone, and why can't they just answer my problem? Because then I could just sort it out. And Fiona, there's so many things that you said that just resonated with me, but also one of the other things that stood out was for young people, and also though particularly for women over 50, the precariousness of housing for people who'd fundamentally been doing okay. So one woman in Bendigo who had worked all her life as a teacher, she'd retired over the last couple of years, suddenly her circumstances have changed and suddenly she's in a very precarious housing situation. So looking at some of the trends that we spotted around the state, but that's a whole nother discussion, so I won't get into that for now. But again, we did use the learnings from our listening tour to inform our advocacy and to continue to inform our advocacy. And we went and listened to hundreds of people in local communities, and we backed it in by phone polling. So when we've got our clear recommendations that are in the report, it's available online. It's a very powerful piece, I think, for government as well. But I'll stop now. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do the thank yous. So thanks, Emma. That's been absolutely enlightening about how you go about the work of the election platform and then the lobbying that relates to it as well. I think that that's a great example for all of us because we know the power of the work that VCOSS does. So this has been a great opportunity for us to understand more about that.